She didn't raise her voice when she said it. That almost made it worse. We were standing in the kitchen. Her kitchen, technically though I'd been the one cooking in it for the better part of 8 months. And she looked at me the way you look at a contractor who's overstayed his welcome. Not angry. Just done. Dad, she said, either you start pulling your weight around here, or this isn't going to work. I set down the dish towel. I looked at my daughter, my Vanessa, who I'd taught to ride a bike in a Kmart parking lot, who I'd driven to every swim meet from age 9 to 17, who had called me crying the night her first marriage fell apart. And I said very quietly, okay. She nodded like we'd agreed on something reasonable. We hadn't agreed on anything, I'd just decided. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start in that kitchen. It starts about a year earlier, in the house where I'd lived for 22 years. The house where my wife, Loretta, had kept a garden along the south fence and made coffee so strong it would wake the neighbors. The house where we'd raised 2 kids and refinished the floors twice and argued about paint colors and made up before the paint was even dry. Loretta died in February. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to gone. We didn't even have time to fight about treatment options, which is what the doctors told us we'd be doing. Instead, we just held hands and watched the window and talked about nothing important, which turned out to be the most important thing we ever did. After she was gone, the house felt like a museum. Every room preserved exactly as she'd left it, but none of it alive anymore. I'd walk past her reading chair and feel the absence like a physical pressure against my chest. I kept her coffee mug on the counter for 2 months before I could put it away. I still haven't touched her garden. My daughter called every few days. She lived about 40 minutes north of me, in a nice suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. She'd moved there with her second husband, Terrence, about 3 years before. Nice house. 4 bedrooms. More space than they used. Dad, you shouldn't be alone in that house, she'd say. It's too big for one person. It's too much to keep up. She wasn't wrong about any of it. I was 61 years old, recently retired from a career in civil engineering and rattling around in a 4-bedroom colonial with a yard I barely had the motivation to mow. The grief was doing something to my sense of time. Days would pass that I couldn't fully account for. So when Vanessa suggested I sell the house and move in with her and Terrence, I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I walked through every room. I sat in the backyard on a Tuesday afternoon and tried to imagine Loretta telling me what to do. I couldn't hear her voice clearly anymore, which scared me enough to pick up the phone. Tell me again about the setup, I said to Vanessa. She was warm, enthusiastic even. They had a guest room with its own bathroom, practically a suite, Dad, and Terrence worked long hours so it would just be the 2 of us most days. She missed me. She wanted family nearby. She said the word home in a way that made me ache for exactly that. I sold the house in April. It went fast, which surprised me. I cleared about $340,000 after everything, paid off the small mortgage Loretta and I still had, and walked away with a number that felt both large and somehow not large enough to represent 22 years. I put most of it in a money market account and a few CDs. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I had my pension and Social Security, and I wasn't a man with expensive habits. I packed what mattered and let the estate sale take the rest. Vanessa helped me sort through things on a Saturday. We cried twice, once over a box of Christmas ornaments, once over a photograph I'd forgotten existed. It was a good day, all things considered. It felt like the beginning of something. Moving in felt right at first. The guest room was exactly as she'd described. Clean, quiet, with a window that looked out over their backyard. I set up my books along one wall and my old turntable in the corner, and for the first week I thought, maybe this works. Maybe this is what the next chapter looks like. I cooked dinner twice that first week because I wanted to. I like cooking. I learned it late in life, after Loretta got sick the first time. A scare back in 2019 that turned out to be nothing. And I'd taught myself to make a proper roast chicken, a good pot of chili, fresh pasta on Sunday mornings. It gave me something to do with my hands. Terrence ate the food, without comment the first night. The second night he said, "Good stuff, Martin," and went back to his phone. Vanessa smiled at me across the table. "See," she said. "This is nice." I agreed that it was. The shift happened slowly enough that I almost didn't notice. It started with small requests. Could I pick up a few things from the grocery store? Of course. Could I get dinner started before 5 because they had plans? No problem. Could I handle the dry cleaning pickup on Thursday? Sure. Each thing by itself was nothing. It was just living together, pitching in. I understood that. I was living under their roof. I wasn't going to sit in my room while they came home to an empty kitchen. But the requests became assumptions, and the assumptions became a schedule. And the schedule was never written down or agreed upon. It just appeared one day, fully formed, like it had always existed. By June, I was cooking dinner 5 nights a week. I was doing 2 loads of laundry on Mondays and Thursdays. I was handling the grocery runs, the pharmacy pickups, the dry cleaning. When their HVAC went out for a week, I was the one who called the contractors, waited for them, and managed the whole repair because Terrence said he was slammed at work, and Vanessa said she didn't know anything about that stuff. I knew about that stuff. I'd spent 30 years as an engineer, so I handled it. I told myself I was contributing, that this was what family did, that Loretta would have done the same in my position. The first moment that actually gave me pause was a Saturday morning in July. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when Terrence came downstairs in his gym clothes, poured himself a cup without a word, and left a pile of his dress shirts on the counter, with a sticky note that said dry clean only. I stood there looking at that sticky note for a full minute. He hadn't said please. He hadn't said anything. He'd left his shirts like he was leaving them for a service he subscribed to. I picked up the shirts and brought them to the dry cleaner. I don't know why. I think I was still operating on the assumption that this was a moment I'd misread, that he'd come home and say something to acknowledge it, and we'd have a small laugh about the sticky note, and that would be the end of it. He came home and asked what was for dinner. I made beef stew. In August, Vanessa's friend Cynthia came to stay for a long weekend. Cynthia lived in Phoenix and came through Ohio every summer. I'd met her once before at Vanessa's wedding and thought she was pleasant enough. I spent most of Friday afternoon preparing. I made a layered dip, cut vegetables, got a cheese board together, marinated chicken thighs for the grill. I was actually looking forward to it. Some company would be nice. That evening, Vanessa and Cynthia sat on the back porch with wine while Terrence manned the grill. My grill, the one I'd brought from home, one of the few things I'd kept, and I carried food back and forth from the kitchen. At one point, Cynthia looked up and said, "Oh my gosh, this cheese board is incredible. Who put this together?" "Martin did," Vanessa said. She smiled at me. Then she turned back to Cynthia and started a story about a trip they'd taken to Charleston 10 years ago. That was my entire mention. I went back inside and washed the prep dishes. The next morning, Cynthia found me in the kitchen making pancakes. She sat at the counter and we talked for about 20 minutes, about Ohio, about retirement, about her work in healthcare administration. She asked good questions. She actually listened to the answers. When Vanessa came down and saw us, she smiled, but something crossed her face, quick and hard to name. I thought about it later and decided it was surprise. She hadn't expected us to have anything to say to each other. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I filed it away. September brought a new development. Terrence's colleague from work, a man named Rob, someone I'd never met, was apparently going through a rough patch. Without any conversation that included me, Terrence invited Rob to stay in the house for a couple weeks while he got back on his feet. Rob took the couch in the den. He was polite enough. He was also there every morning when I came downstairs to make coffee, and he ate dinner with us most nights without ever once asking if he could help with anything. I had a sitting room now instead of a guest suite, because Rob needed the privacy. My bathroom was now shared. I went to Vanessa about it. Calmly, I thought. I told her I'd been glad to accommodate Rob for a couple weeks, but that I'd feel more comfortable knowing the timeline. She looked at me with a kind of exhausted patience that I recognized from when she was 16, and I'd asked her to clean her room. "Dad, he's going through something really hard. Can we just be there for him right now?" I was not Rob's family. I had met Rob twice, but I nodded and went back to my room, my sitting room, and sat in the chair I'd brought from home and looked out the window. Rob stayed for 6 weeks. By October, I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I'd stopped enjoying cooking. I did it because not doing it would mean the question of who was going to do it, and I didn't have the energy for that conversation anymore. I watched football on Sunday afternoons with the volume low so I wouldn't disturb Terrence, who worked from home on Mondays and needed quiet. I took walks in the morning because the house felt smaller than it was. One night I called my son, Kevin. He lives in Portland now, works in tech, and he said, "Dad, just come home. Just come back here." I didn't say anything for a moment. "That is home," I finally said. "I sold the house." There was a silence that lasted too long. "Then make a new one," Kevin said. "Somewhere that's actually yours." I'd been thinking the same thing. I just hadn't let myself say it. The thing that broke it open happened on a Wednesday in November. Vanessa had a work dinner. She's a district manager for a specialty retail chain, and she asked me to make dinner for Terrence and have it ready by 6:30. I made roasted salmon, roasted potatoes, a simple salad with the dressing Loretta used to make from scratch. I set 2 places at the table and had everything warm and ready at 6:20. Terrence came downstairs at 6:45 and looked at the table. "Oh," he said, "I'm actually meeting some guys tonight. I thought Vanessa told you." She hadn't told me. He grabbed his keys and his jacket and said, "Wrap mine up, I'll have it for lunch." The door closed. I stood in the kitchen. I looked at the salmon. I looked at the 2 plates. I looked at the salad with the dressing that had taken me 15 minutes to make from memory because I'd never written it down. And now Loretta was the only one who'd known it, and she was gone. I sat down, and I ate alone. I thought about what Kevin had said. I thought about the sticky note on the dry clean shirts. I thought about the cheese board no one had credited. I thought about my sitting room that used to be my bedroom. I thought about how, in 8 months of living in this house, no one had once asked me how I was doing. Not "How's dinner coming?" or "Can you handle this errand?" "How are you doing?" Since Loretta. I thought about how I'd sold the house where we'd lived for 22 years and handed the money to a bank and moved into a corner of someone else's life and made myself as small as I could manage. And for the first time since February, I felt something other than grief. I felt clear. I didn't say anything that night when Vanessa got home. I didn't say anything the next morning. I made coffee, I made breakfast, I did the laundry. But I also opened my laptop and started looking at apartments. I found one in 2 weeks. It was about 12 miles from where I'd grown up, a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that had been a warehouse in a previous life. High ceilings, good light, a small balcony facing west, the kind of place that was empty and waiting to become something. I paid 3 months up front. I got the keys on a Thursday. I didn't tell Vanessa I was leaving until I was ready to leave. That conversation happened on a Sunday morning in December. She was at the kitchen table with her coffee, scrolling through her phone, and I sat down across from her and waited until she looked up. "I found an apartment," I said. "I'm moving out next weekend." She stared at me. "What? Why?" I had rehearsed this. I'd thought about it for 2 weeks and written some notes and rehearsed it so I wouldn't get pulled into defending the decision one item at a time. "I think it'll be better for everyone," I said. "I'm not unhappy with you. I just need my own space." "Dad, you can't just, is this because of Terrence?" I said it wasn't because of Terrence. I said I'd been thinking about it for a while. Both of these were true, technically. She got quiet in the way she used to get quiet as a kid when she was processing something difficult. I waited. "What about your stuff?" she said, finally. "Where is this apartment?" "Near Grandma's old neighborhood, actually." I smiled a little. "Not too far." She didn't smile back. I don't understand. I thought we were helping each other." I thought about the salmon, the sticky note, the sitting room. "You've helped me a lot," I said. "I mean that." The weekend I moved out, Kevin flew in from Portland. He didn't ask. He just booked a flight and showed up Friday night with a bag and his good attitude, and helped me carry boxes for 2 days straight. We ordered pizza both nights and talked until midnight, and it was the first time since Loretta died that I felt like myself. By Sunday afternoon, the apartment was mine. Books on the shelves, turntable in the corner, coffee maker on the counter. I'd bought a small dining table from a consignment shop. Dark wood, 2 chairs, simple. And I set it under the window where the afternoon light came through in long orange slabs. I made coffee and sat at that table and didn't do anything for a while. No one needed anything from me. No dry cleaning was waiting. No dinner was due at 6:30. The only sound was traffic 3 floors below and some birds I couldn't identify. I thought about Loretta. I thought about how she would have walked through this apartment slowly, touching the walls, looking out the balcony door, already mentally arranging plants along the window ledge. She would have said something like, "Martin, this has good bones." She always said that about things that had potential. I said it out loud, to no one. Good bones. It was 3 weeks before Vanessa called. The first call I let go to voicemail. She said she just wanted to check in, that she hoped I was settling in okay, that she wanted to get together for dinner sometime. I called her back the next day, and we talked for about 15 minutes. It was polite. We made plans to have lunch in January, which we did. It was a little formal, a little careful, like we were both remembering how to talk to each other. Terrence texted me once, about a month after I moved out. He said, "Hey Martin, just wanted to say I hope you're good, and thanks for everything while you were here." I read that message 3 times. Thanks for everything while you were here. Like I'd been a house guest. Like the 8 months of dinners and laundry and contractors and dry cleaning had been the natural expression of a visit. I typed back, "Take care, Terrence," and left it at that. The calls came in February, 22 of them over 9 days. Not 30, but close enough that I stopped counting and started wondering. Vanessa, mostly. 2 from Terrence. 1 from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Cynthia calling from Phoenix, which told me the situation had escalated enough to involve Vanessa's friends. I didn't answer the first several. Not out of spite. I want to be clear about that. I just needed to know what I was walking back into before I walked in. I'd spent 8 months saying yes before I understood the terms. I wasn't going to do that again. When I finally called Vanessa back, she told me that Terrence's position at work had been restructured, that she was dealing with a difficult quarter at her job, that things were stressful, that she missed me, that the house felt different. She didn't say we need you to come back. She said I miss having you around. I know the difference. I miss you too, I said. Let's have dinner next week. Just the 2 of us, she agreed. We went to a place she loves in the short north. Good pasta, too loud on a Friday. Just right for rebuilding something slowly. We talked about her job, her stress, her marriage in the careful way adult children talk to parents about marriages. I told her about the apartment, about the neighbors I'd started to meet, about the morning walks I'd picked back up along the Scioto Trail. At the end of dinner, she said, "You seem good, Dad." "I am good," I said. She nodded. She looked at her wine glass. Then she said, quietly, "I think I didn't realize how much you were doing at the house." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. I drove home that night on empty streets and parked and took the elevator to the 3rd floor and unlocked my door and turned on the lamp and stood in my own kitchen in the dark with the orange glow of the city coming through the balcony door. My apartment, my lamp, my quiet. I filled the kettle and put it on. There's something I keep coming back to when I think about that year. I spent most of it waiting to feel needed, and I confused that feeling, that sense of being necessary, of having somewhere to be and something to do, with belonging. But those are different things. Being needed is transactional. Belonging means someone wants you in the room even when there's nothing you can do for them. Loretta used to want me in the room just to have me there. I'd be reading, she'd be working on something, and every so often she'd look up and smile for no particular reason. Not because I'd done anything, just because I was there and she was glad of it. That's what I'd been looking for when I said yes to moving in. And it's not what I found, but I found my way back to it eventually. Not through that house, and not by making myself useful enough to earn it. Just by walking out the door one December morning, loading my books into a rental van, and giving myself the space to remember who I was without all the noise. The kettle whistled. I made my tea. I sat at the table under the window and watched the last of the evening traffic below, and thought about calling Kevin in the morning. I didn't need to win anything. I just needed to go home.